Good afternoon and welcome to the Road Session Virtual Exchange. This session is titled Still Open for Business, Working with Minority-Owned Firms Through the Pandemic. We appreciate you all jumping on with us today. And I am Nathan Oley, the CEO of the Rural Community Assistance Partnership. We are one of 4 partners putting on these road sessions. Alongside RCAP is the Community Strategies Group as a part of the Aspen Institute, Rural LISC, and the Housing Assistance Council. Today's session, please go to the next slide. Today's session is the first of 3 sessions that we're going to be doing as a part of the road sessions. And wanted to spend just a moment talking about why we're doing these sessions and why we're doing them collaboratively. So the Rural Opportunity and Development Sessions, or ROAD sessions, are really meant to highlight and unpack rural development ideas and strategies that are critical in response to COVID-19 and to the long-term rebuilding and recovery for rural communities. We wanted to feature stories of on-the-ground practitioners who have experience, wisdom, and savvy to share, and to reflect and emphasize the full diversity of rural America, lifting voices and experiences from a wide range of rural communities and economies. We also want to spotlight and highlight rural America's assets and challenges, and infuse practitioner stories and lessons into the rural narratives, policymaking, and practices that are happening across the country. And finally, we want to strengthen the networking of organizations serving rural communities and regions. This last point is really important. It's the reason that these 4 organizations have come together to put these together, to highlight all the great things that are happening, but also obviously the issues and disparities that we're seeing in rural communities. This is the first of 3 sessions that are planned. The next session, which you will be getting more information on in the coming week or so, is titled Lessons and Takeaways from the Rural Immigrant Experience with COVID-19. Today's session has 2 main components. The first is a panel discussion that will happen from now through 3:30, which is business owners and intermediaries telling their story of working through the COVID-19 pandemic, followed by breakout rooms where you can have a chance to meet others, ask questions, talk, and really share your own experiences with one another. It's meant to be an open forum with a facilitated discussion, and we hope that everyone will join us for the breakout rooms for the last half hour of today's session. So first, we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about why this is the first topic that we're covering. And for us, it's really important and critical to understand the role that small business and entrepreneurship play in rural communities and why small businesses and entrepreneurs are so important to rural communities. First, we want to start with the context of where and why this is important to rural areas. And there's a general perception out there for maybe those folks that either aren't engaged in rural communities, or even in some cases those that are in rural communities, that innovation and entrepreneurship is not happening and thriving in rural areas. When in fact, we know the difference is that there is quite a bit of entrepreneurship and innovation happening. In fact, if you look at entrepreneurship starts per 100,000 or per 1,000 residents, the smaller the county that you're looking at, the larger number of self-employed and startup companies you're actually seeing. It may look and feel a little bit different. It may not be the tech companies that you think of in Silicon Valley or even in the East Coast, but there are a tremendous amount of small businesses and entrepreneurs that are starting, growing, and thriving in rural communities across the country. As we look at the next slide, you're also going to see that those rural businesses are also more resilient based on the smaller the community they live in. So we know, number one, we have a great number of startups and small businesses that are starting and thriving in rural communities, but we also know that they're more resilient. And in times like this, that resiliency is a really key factor as we think about how do we drive and grow prosperity in rural communities. So as we go to the next slide, we're actually going to talk about why this is incredibly important, specifically when we're talking about COVID-19 and the impact in rural areas in COVID-19. We know that the pandemic-induced economic slowdown in the U.S. has caused thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of businesses to shut down. But what we also know is minority and women-owned businesses have been affected disproportionately in that closure. From February of this year through April, the number of business owners fell by 3.3 million. That's a 22% drop and the largest recorded drop in American history. Just to put that in context, under the Great Recession, there was a 5% drop in those numbers. If we dig deeper into those numbers, you see that 41% of that decrease came from African-American or Black-owned businesses. 32% came from Latinx-owned businesses, 26% from Asian-owned businesses, and 25% from women-owned businesses. And so we know there's a huge and disproportionate number of these businesses that have had to close as a result of COVID-19. And as we look at the final slide in this context, we want to take a quick look on the SBA's implementation of the Paycheck Protection Program. We know this is the fundamental and biggest way the federal government has invested in trying to help support small businesses and keep the doors open. Within the PPP program, as we look at the data, minority and rural businesses, which were supposed to be maybe the single most important beneficiaries of the CARES Act, were often left out of this implementation. And as a result, rural and minority-owned businesses, especially those falling under both those categories, rural and minority-owned, may have missed out on accessing PPP loans and thus have been hit especially hard in this crisis. We're going to highlight and talk about some of those examples of both where there were struggles, but also obviously where there were successes in rural and minority-owned businesses throughout the time that we talk about today. But we want to make sure that we highlight and think about the important aspects and the impacts of COVID-19 specifically on rural and minority-owned businesses throughout this conversation. Next slide, please. So before we get started, just a couple quick pieces of housekeeping for you. Everyone on this call, your mics are muted. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat box to highlight those or record those, and we have people standing by to help address that. At 3:30, at the end of these presentations, we're going to enter the breakout discussion time. You would have received a link provided in your registration confirmation or in an email that was sent to you today. Within that, there's a link for you to actually click into that breakout room at 3:30. If you have not received it, please send a note to the following email address, csg.program@aspeninstitute.org, and they will make sure that you have a link for the breakout session at 3:30. Recordings of the first hour's worth of conversation will be available on the Aspen CSG event webpage within the next 48 hours, and we will also be sending that link to you through the registration link that we were provided. Next slide, please. So today's conversation is going to be moderated by a fantastic partner of ours, Del Gines. Del is a senior community development advisor with the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. Del has been at the forefront of data and analysis and conversations around rural and minority-owned businesses for decades. And we're thrilled to have Del both with us to help give his own context, but also to facilitate the conversations today. Del, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm really excited to be here today. This is a very interesting and long overdue panel, to be honest. I've been working on ecosystem building in rural and urban communities for a decade now. My 10th year at the Fed will be in January, and we've done a lot of conversations on rural and a lot of conversations on, urban and diverse entrepreneurship and the ecosystems that support them. But, and this is honestly, it's my fault, we haven't really done a lot on the intersection between the two, because we know that diversity is expanding in rural communities, and they have a lot of entrepreneurs in those communities as well. And so this is a very good time to have this conversation, both in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic and also where we need to go as an economy in the United States to really empower and value our rural communities. So with that being said, I want to move right into the panelists, because we have to be very nimble today. And I am going to ask that if you are tweeting, that you utilize the tweet hashtag Rhodes Session, that's Road Session, and make sure that you share out with your followers and your friends the great panel. So today our first panelists are Atsadan Chavez from Nava Education Project and Vanessa Roanhorst from Native Women Lead and Roanhorst Consulting. And we're going to talk a little bit about Native-owned businesses in Indian country. And so I'd like to welcome both of you to the panel. How are you doing today?
Doing well, thank you.
Doing good.
That's
excited.
Great. Yeah, it's awesome. So I was fortunate enough to be on the pre-call with both of you yesterday, and we got into some really deep stuff. But before we get there, let's first just give us a little elevator pitch about both of your respective businesses and the organizations you represent. Ats, if you want to, tee us off, let's start with you.
Sure. Yat a she Atsa Chavez shinishe pitutni nishle kisani bashachin nakai det ne dashache kisani dasha nale Goatehopa, everyone. My name is Atadi Chavez. I'm Folded Arms Clan from the Did Nation, born from Kiwa Pueblo. I'm the executive director of the Native Education Project and NM Native Vote, both Native-led nonprofit organizations based in Tewa country, which is Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. I hope each and every one of you and your families are doing safe and well during these unsettling times.
Yeah, it's Vanessa Roanhorse. I am Dana as well from the Navajo Nation. Grew up on the nation, live here in Albuquerque. I'm the CEO of Roanhorse Consulting, which is a small firm based in Albuquerque. It's an Indigenous women-led group, and we focus on community-led economic development and different ways and forms of access to capital. And then I also get the privilege to also be one of 8 co-founders of Native Women Lead, which is a nonprofit organization nationally focused on lifting Indigenous women into positions of CEO and leadership.
So part of the way we structured this panel, which I think was pretty innovative, was we asked the intermediaries to actually bring a business owner or invite a business owner that worked with them. So how have you two worked together in the past?
Can I go outside to start? Okay. Well, so part of our work within Roanhorse Consulting and with Native Women Lead is really about connecting dots, resource curation, and kind of moving in between the interstitial space between the private, public, and government sectors, and then another layer of tribal sector. And through that work, it's also about us building a connected ecosystem across not only our New Mexico-based tribal communities, but also nationally with all of the other 574 federally recognized tribes. I think that's right. Is it still 570? Anyway, it changes, which is an interesting dynamic in itself. However, through this process, because I'm myself an entrepreneur, I have my own company. Part of why we started Native Women Lead, I wanted to be part of it, was because my journey to do this work was there wasn't a lot of resources for me that was led by women who looked like me, who understood where I was coming from and my unique challenges. But also, more importantly, there also wasn't actual capital resources going to communities like us. And so through Roanhorse Consulting and Native Women Lead, we've built a community and network. And Atsa, through Nava EP, as well as her own personal company, because I think as people of color, we all have our side hustles, because we know we got to wear multiple hats. It's the only way for us to have a diversified safety net. And so what we've been able to do is we continue to connect, and you'll get to learn a lot more about Nava as well as IndigiLens, which is Atsa's other company. But how we actually kind of came to this discussion, and what I was thinking about, was when COVID-19 happened and when we saw small businesses starting to get centered in this conversation more effectively, immediately, from my perspective, we knew the Native American small business voice was not going to be present. We knew very much that no one was going to be focusing on us and that we couldn't wait. And so we coordinated very quickly, and we mobilized a number of Native entrepreneurial support organizations in the Southwest to do some surveying and questions and saying, what's the biggest thing that's going to happen to you? Where are your biggest concerns? And if you don't know, Native Americans are growing businesses just as other communities are, exponentially. However, most of us are solopreneurs. So we're not like huge companies that oftentimes when you think of entrepreneurship pop into your head. And one of the things with the CARES Act 1, 2, and 3 packages is that we knew immediately geographically we were going to be left out, because physically we didn't have any of the certified SBA 7s near many of our tribes. Many of our tribes actually have to drive hundreds of miles to access banks and be able to go places. And if you are Native American, you knew we were being impacted by COVID at a higher rate. Many of our tribes and reservations and pueblos were locked down. And so as a result, when PPP finally came about and we were able to use other financial intermediaries, we were grateful through our CLC's network that we could find mission-aligned partners who cared about Native American businesses explicitly. And so I reached out to my community, and I knew Nava EP, which is a critical and one of the most important organizations for us in New Mexico. I was able to support Atsa to be able to get PPP, and she did. And I would say that happened because of relationships.
So Atsa, jump off from there and kind of give us your context for what Vanessa just said and your business organization?
So first of all, Native peoples are really resilient. We're still here, even though we've been through the spread of disease and numerous policies throughout American history designated to dispossess us of our land and our diverse cultures. But we know, given poverty, the lack of healthcare, the prevalence of certain diseases, lack of water, lack of housing, lack of healthy foods, all of these intersections of disproportional funding have made Native nations more vulnerable to this particular pandemic. Because of the closure of many of these pueblos where, we have libraries, we have museums that we can go to have centering points for our culture as Americans. However, for a lot of Native Americans, those touch pieces are actually members of our community. They're our elders. They're the ones that are the language barriers. They're the ones that retain religious and cultural heritage. So for us, having to close those borders were crucial. Even closing those borders caused some havoc within people who live around us, because, we have to always maintain our sovereignty as sovereign nations. And so we had issues with that. We also had issues where people, because we were sheltering in place, folks weren't able to access things like PPE loans or the services that everyone else is used to because of lack of broadband infrastructure within a lot of these tribal nations. So although some of us were able to still telework, that wasn't a possibility for many of our residents within our tribal nations. So being able to have folks like Vanessa and people at Native Women Lead and people who are just starting to build these infrastructures, we're able to communicate with one another and say, hey, here's a bank, here's a resource that you can use to get the services that you need. But without that, absent of that, we're not able to have access to those things. And so for our organization, NAVA Education Project, our mission is to unite community stakeholders to actively improve the quality of life for Native American communities and protect the continuation of our cultures. So we promote awareness and action on issues facing these communities throughout or through community organizing and educational strategies. Right now, we're leading the NM Native Census Coalition, so we're actively involved in what's going on with census. And then through NM Native Vote, we have our partisan and nonpartisan votership that we're trying to get out there. Native Americans in New Mexico could lose political representation if there is that census undercount. Currently, we have 6 Native American state house districts and 3 state Senate districts where Native American populations are over 50%.
I need to hop in because we're almost at time, but we got about 2 minutes left, and this I think is important. So, bullet point for both of you: what does the nation need to do better by Native businesses? And I know that's a big question, but give me 1 or 2 really bullets that we can leave our audience on, so they can begin to marinate on this.
Well, first of all, any business who received funds under $150,000 from the PPP needs to just be automatically forgiven. We do not need to be forcing those small businesses to have to try to prove forgiveness. Is one key bullet that's really crucial right now. The next one is we need to be able to ensure that the CARES Act and any other future stimulus acts are explicitly carved out funds for minority, Native, and rural and tribal businesses. It just has to be an immediate carve out because there's no way else we're going to get through this.
And I think I would say organizations like ours are so crucial and critical to helping Native American communities a lot across the state. And so funding for us needs to be general funding, needs to be at longer durations, because there are so many different things that folks don't understand that, need that flexibility for Native communities.
Outstanding. Hey, I appreciate both of you for coming on, and hopefully we can have this conversation again a little bit longer. But for audience members that were watching, if you want to go into the breakout with Atsa and Vanessa, I encourage you to. I mean, we've only really not even scratched the surface on it. The needs of our Native brothers and sisters and how we can support them as a nation. So now I'm going to pivot to my home state entrepreneurs, which is Guadalupe Milan and Yesenia Peck. And we're going to talk a little bit about serving Latinx entrepreneurs during this time period. So I would like to say welcome to both of you.
Hello. Hi. Thank you. Thank you, Dale. It's good
So
to
we're gonna follow the same pattern. Could you both give us a quick elevator speech on your respective organizations and businesses, and then we'll get into some of the meatier topics of conversation. We can start with Yesenia on this one.
Yes, my name is Yesenia Peck. I work for Nebraska Public Power District, but I'm also a volunteer vice president for the Nebraska Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Nebraska Latino Business Coalition, and the Nebraska Latino American Commission.
Thank you, Del. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Guadalupe Millan, and I am the owner of All United Building Maintenance. We're a commercial and residential cleaning company based in Bellevue, Nebraska. So thank you for this opportunity to tell my story.
So, let's get right into it, and we'll stick with you, Guadalupe. Tell us a little bit about how you've worked with Yesenia and the various organizations that she represented, and then we'll pivot to Yesenia, and she could tell us a little more about what they're working on and what they're seeing in the Latinx communities in Nebraska.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So first of all, I want to say that Yesenia is such a great network connector, encouraging and supporting business. She supports all the business owners in Nebraska, and just provides us with different opportunities throughout Nebraska. I've met Yesenia through the Nebraska Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. We have done work together with the Nebraska Hispanic Chamber as volunteers, and just basically helping all the small business communities throughout Nebraska.
Yesenia?
Yes, thanks, Dale. Well, first, let me tell you, I would like to explain a little bit about the area I serve. So when we think of areas in the United States, we think of border states like, when we think of Latinos, we think of border states like California and Texas, but the Latino population is booming in rural Midwestern states like Nebraska. So right now, in the past, Omaha has been known as the meat capital of the world, but however, after the 80s, this disintegrated as processors moved to tiny towns all over the Midwest. So this created a diaspora of Latino immigrants in Nebraska. So once you leave Omaha, all the state is rural. So with that being said, there are several economic drivers in Nebraska that include the meat processing, agricultural support, and the various individual small businesses. So the Latino community, as part of this economy in Nebraska, has been impacted from COVID-19. Meat processing has been especially hard hit, which affects rural communities I serve. And there are workers' rights and legal matters involved and taken care of by the right professional stakeholders. So the Nebraska Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, in partnership and support of statewide organizations, has accomplished its mission by supporting businesses and strategizing to make sure that business happen in Nebraska. So actions were taken accordingly. So we understood that a communication was a priority in this case of emergency. And consequently, as a first step, we co-created the Nebraska Latino Business Coalition, which is a group of Latino leaders across the state that took as mission to support the Latino small businesses that were facing challenges during COVID-19. So through this coalition and the support of the extension of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and Nebraska Public Power, we surveyed 818 Latino business in the state. We identify businesses in rural areas that need help. Our research showed that 515 of those businesses didn't qualify for SBA loans. 494 didn't have credit or didn't have access to credit. So 268 were individuals using IT numbers or individual taxpayer identification number for filing annual income taxes. So which means that some may not be legal residents and they still pay taxes and create employment. So with these IT numbers, they do business. regardless of the legal status. It's a federal number to pay taxes. Now, why this is so important to consider? Why was that important for the Nebraska Hispanic Chamber to consider, especially for businesses in rural areas? Is because these Latino businesses in rural areas do not have easy access to loans, grants, or any other kind of support. So they have to travel all the way to Omaha or another town with more resources, and many times they need to bring an interpreter to get service. So under COVID, these challenges were exacerbated and created more stress to our business owners because they couldn't look for help. And many didn't know how to apply for federal assistance, and many didn't qualify even if they knew how. So a big portion of the Latino business community in Nebraska were ineligible for government assistance and loans during pandemic. And definitely language barrier was always a huge issue. So in rural communities, basic needs like food, medicine, etc., is extremely limited. And the Nebraska Hispanic Chamber of Commerce was requested to help on these basic needs by individuals and business owners. And this is not generally our mission at the NHSC, but COVID has changed for everyone. And we couldn't ignore these needs. And we partner with rural organizations like Latino organizations, Chamber of Commerce, and provided help, the help needed. Now,
I know we've had 2 outreach calls with you. I've talked about, and hopefully if we have enough time, we can get back and dig into some of that deeper conversation. So Guadalupe, I'm interested in what you are seeing, you and your business owner peers, as it relates to the COVID-19 impact on your firms and firms in your peer group.
Yeah, thank you, Del. Yeah, definitely. As far as myself and my company, we did suffer loss of business just because we had restaurants and we had schools, and as you know, those were really affected as well. So it's that trickle effect that happens in the in this times. Now, the lack of funding, as Yesenia stated, it was very real with me. Especially because I am a DACA recipient, and it's usually the majority of the funding is for U.S. citizens. Unfortunately, we are still contributing. We provide jobs, we create jobs, and this is the first time that I've actually spoke about my story, so thank you so much for allowing me to do that. But anyways, it has been very difficult. I can tell you that in order for me to keep my employees in payroll, I had to use owner's equity. Thankfully, I've been able to manage the money and able to have, those savings to be able to provide payroll support for my employees. I did not qualify for any funding, so was the hard part about this. I can tell you that it was very difficult knowing that, yes, we are still contributing, but there's nothing available for small companies like myself with owners that are not citizens. And, this is another whole topic because it is, immigration law is super complicated. I can tell you that I've been waiting in line for 20 years. And so it is very difficult. At this point, but hopefully we can get things rolling with, once we start knowing a little bit more of that. But yes, I mean, it was challenging being able to keep those employees safe as well, trying to make sure that our employees had the personal protective wear. It was very challenging, or still challenging, trying to get all that protective wear, such as gloves for them, and being able to provide those masks. I mean, all of that costs money that has to come from, owner's equity at this point, in my case. And I can tell you that other colleagues, such as myself, who are business owners in cleaning companies, are in the same boat. They have no other support for funding. So it is very crucial that, whoever is out there understands, the hard part about this situation.
Guadalupe, let me actually ask you the same question as the last group, and we'll lead off with you. And we got about 2 minutes left, so really bullet points. Both you as well as Yesenia talked about some of the challenges, with funding and access to resources. So, and for the rest of my panelists too, not just what needs to be done to support through COVID, but even after that, what do both of you feel in bullet points again, the United States can do to better support our Latinx entrepreneurs in rural communities?
I can tell you that it is important for the United States to understand that even as immigrants and as non-US citizens, we are contributing to this nation. We are creating jobs, and we are still suffering the situation. So we definitely need help understanding. So I guess be more open to understanding how we are contributing to this country, and being susceptible to create laws that will help us and support us.
All right, Yesenia, take us home. Bullet
Yes,
points.
I really would agree with Guadalupe, and this is the most important one, just making sure that the laws and the benefits are for everyone. Just getting to know the communities that the United States have, and the barriers and the challenges, and especially, well, immigrants, it's not easy to be one. So it's important for our country to get to know what are these challenges for our community too.
Well, I appreciate you both, especially being from Nebraska and, working to make our economy great. And I appreciate you again for being on the panel, and we'll be able to catch up again. If you want to have a deeper conversation with them, make sure that you hop into their group when we're done. So thanks to both of you ladies. So next up, we have Tony Walker, Cynthia Terry, and Cassandra Williams, and we're going to talk about African-American businesses in rural communities. So how are you all doing today?
Doing great, thank you.
So let's get right into it. And well, let me announce your organizations and be fair. So we do have, actually, I just lost my screen. There we go. We have Tony Walker from Precious Heart Student Center, Cassandra Williams from Hope Enterprise Corporation, and Cynthia Terry from Communities Unlimited. And again, their bios are actually out there where I can't do it justice in that. So let's go and start. And since we have a little bit longer panel, I'll let whoever wants to hop in. And since Cynthia is actually on my screen, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about your organization and how you have worked or interacted with the other panelists that we have today.
Sure, thanks, Dale. Communities Unlimited, we're a CDFI. We serve 7 states. Arkansas, Alabama, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Texas. Just want to mention all of them. Our work with small businesses, which Ms. Tony Walker is one of our clients. Our work with small businesses includes providing loans as small as $500 up to $100,000, and providing our clients with intensive management consulting and trainings. And just want to speak to our management consulting work just a little bit. Our consultants work one-on-one with business owners, and we develop a customized technical assistance plan with each of them to problem solve growth issues, implement management systems, to work with them on strengthening their business, financial literacy, and assist them in access to capital, which is what we did today with our partnership with Hope Credit Union, which is where Cassandra works, and with Ms. Tony Walker. So I'll let one of them step in.
Who wants to step up to the plate? Tony, you're on the spot.
Okay, hi, I'm Tony Walker, and I am located in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, which is a part of the Delta down in Arkansas. My program was founded in 2010 by myself, and I often say just me and the Lord. And it is a 501c3 charitable nonprofit multi-purpose community center. I have several programs running within this facility. I serve clients from the age of 0 up to 77. So I work with programs that serve children from 0 to 13. I work with young ladies, partner with the Department of Workforce, helping young women to get off of welfare and move into the workforce arena by providing job skills, just teaching them how to even fill out a job application, how to create a resume, how to interview. and then how to work in a facility and provide professional attire for them as well. And then the senior piece is with AARP. We partner with them, and that program serves older people, 55 and older, if I say that, and I'm 62. But anyway, for those that want to get back into the work arena. So we just work from one end of the spectrum to the other. Now, the biggest piece of my program is the child care piece. We are state accredited through what we call Arkansas Better Beginnings. And that has 3 levels, and we are at the top level 3 to provide quality child care for students. We are preparing them to move to link right into the school district with education. We also have a food bank, which is a big part of our program.
Hey, Tony, I'm gonna cut you off because hopefully we'll look at the bio, and you're doing too much awesome work. And we got more time.
Okay.
Put that time out on you for a second.
Okay.
Some of the meaty stuff after we chat with Cassandra for a second about what she's doing with Hope Enterprise Corporation.
Okay, all right.
Hi, thank you, Dale. Cassandra Williams with Hope Enterprise Corporation, Hope Credit Union. We're a CDFI across the Deep South, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, bridging the capital gap for entrepreneurs of color and just businesses that would not have access to capital. Thank you.
Wow, I know you all do more than that because we had, I believe, your CEO at the Fed before, but we can get into some of the meat of that. So let's just do a roundtable since we got 3 of you, which is a bit unique for this. So let's just talk. Let's go back in reverse order from the way we started. What have you seen with the pandemic and with COVID and the impact on rural Black businesses in your areas? We'll start with you, Cassandra.
I think, and just being part of the panel, we appreciate that, and thank you for allowing us to be here. Cynthia and I have partnered together to help entrepreneurs, and I think the consulting piece, where they're doing intensive training and walking alongside the business owner has been like the most important piece of this. And I know Tony will talk about the PPP, her PPP experience, but I think just really highlighting the partnership, having access to capital, but also having the partnership with Communities Unlimited and having the consulting services, because oftentimes business owners don't have the financial piece together. They might not have a marketing plan. So all those things that business owners need, they've been able to help and assist with that. And then access to capital.
Tony, you want to jump off on that PPP?
Of course. I think I'm excited. I just kind of jumped the gun, but hey, I initially heard about the PPP, and I had no intention of, reaching out for that because, I was thinking, we've got COVID here. My program is a fee for service. We closed on March the 11th, so we were not providing childcare, so we really didn't have funding coming in. So how am I going to pay that back? That was my mindset. And then as I learned more about it, then I decided, well, maybe I'll give it a try. And then I heard all the funding was gone. But then I got an email from one of my colleagues at ASU Jonesboro, which is our hub for early childhood. And she told us that, hey, there's still some PPP funding out there, and it's you can contact Communities Unlimited, and they're working with Hope Credit Union, and they'll be able to help you. That's what I did, and I was connected with Akira, and I think he works under Cynthia. And Akira was a godsend, very transparent, very helpful, walked me through the process, told me what I needed, and it was a very short turnaround, and we were able to get the PPP. Since then, I brought back my employees for 8 weeks and allowed them to work and get educational hours. It's been awesome.
So Cynthia, why don't you jump in there and talk about what are you seeing, along with the ways that you all work with entrepreneurs like Tony, but what are you seeing in the general landscape of rural Black businesses and the challenges that they're facing in COVID? But you can go before, you can even estimate for after, however you want to take it.
Sure. So we started calling all of our borrowers, as well as, because we're a CDFI and provide small business loans, and our non-lending clients to check on them in March, mid-March, and by the end of March, 95% of them had closed. What we did to pivot was created a couple of loan products for those clients, and we also just started educating our entrepreneurship team. We started educating ourselves on the PPP program and the EIDL program, because what we were learning, and in my conversations with Cassandra, was many of our Black-owned businesses were afraid to apply. They were intimidated by the process, or they had applied previously with traditional banks and never heard anything back. So that's when we decided we wanted to work together, Communities Unlimited. We decided our focus would be on the technical assistance. We started educating clients like Ms. Tony on what the program is, how it can benefit you, and we're gonna walk alongside you as your intermediary between the bank, Hope Credit Union, and help collect the documentation that she needed. We assisted 24 clients, most of those through Hope Credit Union, a couple of those through another partner, RCAC, and helped 88% of these were minority businesses that received $465,000 in PPP funding. And our team is in the process now where we're gonna work with Hope Credit Union to help those clients apply for forgiveness. I believe Akira's already started working with Ms. Tony on helping her walk through those intimidating documents that are going to be required in order for her to get the forgiveness.
I always got to remember to unmute my mic, on these calls. I was about to say something profound, but my mic was muted. Anyway, so that's a joke for those who don't know me who are watching. So, in the last 3 minutes, since we got 3 panels, same question to you. What does America need to do better at this time and afterwards to support Black rural entrepreneurs? We'll start with you, Cynthia. Go back the other way.
Lost my mute button, sorry. So a couple of things that I heard a couple of the other panelists mention, which is, and I made note of them, is reducing the forgiveness or increasing the amount that can be forgiven on the PPP loan. A couple of other things is a lot of our funding to provide the technical assistance is federal funding. And many times that federal funding, and in most cases actually has a match with it. So I think reducing the match so that we can provide the more intensive technical assistance that these minority businesses need, because many of them are first generation businesses. Also, I think as far as our collaboration is, for those of us that do provide similar services, we need to understand that we are better together. Collaboration is good. When collaborating, identify what you do best, partner with other organizations on what they do best, and then our small businesses will receive the best of us all. And I'll end it on that note.
And that's why it's Hope Credit Union. Good stuff. Tony. You're on mute.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Well, I guess from my perspective, and it's very simplistic, I just feel that childcare facilities, that our legislatures, our people that are, in the offices, they need to know that we're here. They need to understand how important we are. I mean, the economy needs us. People need childcare so that they can go to work. And it seems as if we're overlooked, I know that Gina Dickey, the lady from ASU that contacted me, she has gone to the legislatures several times. We've done petitions just trying to make sure that they know that we are here and that we need assistance. Just recently, she sent me an email asking me to be on a panel that she's going to have with one of the powers that be that are discussing funds to help some of the larger businesses. And she's reminding them, don't forget about the daycares. Don't forget that they're here and we're providing an essential service, making sure that they're, so that those people in the economy can work, So they just need to know that we're here.
Gotcha. And Cassandra, we're at time, so take us home.
I would just say dittoing everything that my colleagues have said, and just having an opportunity to partner. Partnerships are, as Cynthia has already mentioned, is really important. But so many challenges in the Deep South, the racial and economic issues. You know, a minute is not enough time to really address, you know, persistent poverty for 3 decades in a row, with, you know, so all of those things, not enough time. But I think just continuing to partner with organizations like Communities Unlimited and others to support Black businesses.
That's a definite, yes.
So that's great. And again, if you want to learn more about, you know, addressing the challenges of rural African-American entrepreneurs, make sure that you hop into their session. And now we're going to pivot. We're actually going to bring everybody back and kind of do a 15-minute Q&A before we do launch into the breakout sessions. So I believe our AV specialist is going to bring the rest of the group back for this chat. And this is my only caveat for the folks that, my panelists, you know, be as succinct as possible, because we do have, you know, quite a few people, and hopefully we can get through as many questions as possible over the next few minutes. And so here's the first question, and feel free to just hop in, and I'll try to moderate and steer as best as possible with everyone. The first question, and let's be very explicit about this, is, are there challenges that are unique to getting ahead in a rural place? Conversely, what have been some of the benefits for rural entrepreneurs or small businesses trying their hand at building a business? And I would love to hear this from everyone's perspective, you know, within their respective race or ethnic group. So who wants to jump in and lead off on that question? The challenges and benefits of a rural place as a diverse entrepreneur. All right, don't be shy. Let's start. I'm looking at Vanessa now, so I'm gonna start with you.
Well, so what are the challenges for rural businesses, challenges and opportunities? I mean, for our community members, Native people, they move seamlessly between tribal, rural, and urban. And I just want to make a note that rural does not equal tribal. However, rural cannot exclude tribal. So that's a really important piece. And that's a challenge in itself, because oftentimes we get lumped in.
Can you expand just a little bit on that? So add a little clarity, because that's a very interesting comment.
Because when we talk about tribal businesses or businesses based on reservations and pueblos, it's because we are sovereign nations and we have a nation-to-nation relationship with the federal government. It isn't to the state, it's directly to our federal government. So when we think about how our businesses are going to engage, we're dealing with a very different thing based upon our treaties, and as well as the fact that we have trust land, which also means with trust land, we are unable to actually have equity in the land beneath the feet that we are on. And so when we think about access to businesses around equity, getting a bank account, getting access to capital, being a reservation-based business comes with a whole different level of ownership and as well as ability to build your own sort of wealth. An opportunity though I think for our tribal businesses is many of our tribal businesses are working in the informal economy and sometimes the formal economy. But the cool thing that's happening is most of our businesses are social enterprises that are focused on place-based solutions coming from a cultural place. And I think that's a huge asset that we often overlook about our tribal business community members, is that while we have these challenges, we're also at the front lines trying to solve some of the biggest issues with climate change, hunger, food, and water poverty issues.
Who else wants to hop in there on that? So we're talking about rural place and the challenges and opportunities for entrepreneurs of color, of wide variety of race, and I understand some of this is going to be geographic specific, even microculture specific, but just from your own personal perspective, Yesenia, Guadalupe, Tony, Cassandra, Cynthia, Atsa, what do you see are the challenges and the benefits of being in rural?
Well, for this specific group, for the Latino community, it's a little complicated, the challenges, even though I have as a rule saying that challenges are opportunities, instead of challenges. But really, it's a little complicated for our community because it has to do with legality. It's got to do with immigration. It has to do with big changes across in the country. Now, in rural areas, especially in Nebraska, again, it's like the basics for us are a language barrier. It's one of us. It's a challenge for us, and the opportunities. I think opportunities for the different organizations to innovate. We innovate with creating initiatives that can reach out to our small businesses. So I think for the Nebraska, for the Latino community in rural areas, in addition to the regular challenges of a small business, we have these little things like the language barrier, the legality, and make it difficult.
How about, the African American and rural benefits and challenges?
I can speak, well, Tony is there in Pine Bluff, but I think people being afraid to approach financial institutions in our community, that's been a barrier because we have been locked out. So you don't have the trust of financial institutions, even though like Hope is in the Deep South, not having access to broad financial institutions, financial services. Arkansas has led the way on like payday lending and trying to disrupt that. But in our communities, people utilize payday lending a lot and they don't have access to true affordable financial services. So I see that as a challenge. Of course, we address that at Hope, but I think just the broader community and just awareness of being educated, all of the things that we hear, healthcare issues, healthy food access, all of those things are challenges in our community. And I think just everybody that's spoken, they address that in one way or the other, but particularly in the African-American rural community.
So let me, target this first at, the business owners or those that are, most of you, it sounds like, are doing some form of organizational management and regardless, but let's start with some of the business owners. And this is a question that we kind of touched on in what could the federal, and I'm going to add in state governments do to better support, your respective business types and business communities out in your rural communities? How about Guadalupe?
Thank you, Del. Yes, so again, one of the things that I think that the government needs to understand is how, how us as immigrants and Latinos are providing economic growth, especially in my state, Nebraska. I think that as Latinos and minorities, we are very underestimated at what we can do, but they're not realizing that we don't have the resources that others would have. Imagine what we can do if we had those resources. So definitely to the government, you need to start looking at what we're capable of doing and not what is being said. And take a look at the surveys, take a look at the reality of what's happening. We are creating jobs for ourselves, and we are also creating jobs for other people. So
that's what's your take on that? Federal, state, what can they, do better policies to kind of support the businesses within your geography and your community?
Sure. I think one of the main big steps was, we got the CARES Act funding. Native communities here in our state got a huge chunk of it. But what they negated to figure out was a way to get us that funds. So consequently, the Navajo Nation, who's been the #1 hotspot in the country, had to wait almost 3 months to be able to get any of that funding, to be able to utilize any sort of resources. I think the other thing is that we remain invisible and ignored in the majority of the dialogue in the news, and the current administration has ignored our government to government relationships. So that's why these nonprofit organizations like ours, NAVA EP, are so crucial, because they give us a seat at that table. People are used to working with us within our state. We're legislators recognize us because we also have that C4 organization. So we're able to have that voice, but because we also have that grassroots foundation, we're able to get what people are really needing right at the source. Once COVID happened in our state, none of the state officials, none of the city officials were really able to even have communications with any of the tribal leaderships. But we had those because we started this coalition, because we're members of those particular communities. So having people within the state that recognize how to move between tribal and municipal and state and federal levels are crucial in Indian country, being able to figure out what the possible solutions are. If you're only working in one particular part, then you may be missing a whole other section. And so having folks like Native Women Lead and these organizations that work and collaborate with one another, we're the ones that are coming up with those creative solutions. We're the ones saying, hey, you're underfunding us in all these different areas. And as long as we're able to have that seat and have that voice, then I think we can make some true change in terms of how things are funded and what our economies eventually look like.
Outstanding. Tony? State and federal policies that could help business owners like you and your community.
Well, just to kind of piggyback on what Cassandra said in Guadalupe, I was just thinking as they were talking, in our area down here in the Delta, most of us, are on this lower end of the economic, guidelines, or the poverty guideline, whatever. And so there's that lack of trust, especially with, as she said, our race or whatever. I mean, a prime example, I've lived in my town for 20 years, never asked the bank for a loan and went for a loan. Credit score is almost 800. And I couldn't get the loan because they didn't know me. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, but it happens, okay? To start my daycare, I had to use my retirement to be able to do this. And then the other piece was, as Guadalupe was saying, they don't really know us. And I don't see any representatives being sent out to get to know us, know who we are, what we're doing, how we're helping the economy. And that should be happening, but it's not really happening. Some of the smaller daycare owners, some of the people that I know, even they've not even been in the arena that I've been in. They don't have a degree, and they're afraid, kind of like what she was saying, to even go to the bank and ask for a loan. So many challenges, so many things that we face, just for me to get one program to help my facility, I had to be on 4 or 5 different boards. I'm just about boarded out, just trying to get to be known in the community so I can get some assistance. It's really hard. And I hope that makes sense to everybody.
Well, this conversation could have been a whole conference, with a variety of topics. And I just applaud the foresight of the navigating committee, the panel committee, for thinking of this and looking at the intersection between diversity and rural. And as we get ready to pivot, I do want to just say a few things. I think some of the key themes that came out is the necessity of collaboration, the necessity of empathy and consideration for the respective needs of diverse communities in these geographies. Really can't be a top-down approach. You have to listen to the lived insights of the folks that are there and design solutions that really truly impact them that way, instead of thinking that you know best. And my personal pledge, being that I'm doing this work, like I said, and really hadn't thought about doing the intersectionality of this, is to really amplify my work in this space and really being more considerate of the needs of our Native, Latinx, and African Americans in rural communities, and really bring that greater national attention to this. So you all can lean on me, and I'll support you to the degree in which I can from the KC Fed. And I just want to, again, express my appreciation for all of you. I know we're in a tough time. Thank you for the time commitment that you made to be with us today and share your insights and wisdom. And hopefully the attendees got as much value out of it as I've gotten. So now it's time to pivot over into our breakout session and pick which one you want and engage a little bit deeper there. I would turn it back over to our hosts.
Thank you, Dell, and thank you everyone who participated today. This was a fantastic conversation. As Dell just mentioned, you should have received a link for the breakout session, so we encourage everyone to do that. You actually will be randomized into conversations, and so look forward to great conversations in the breakouts. Thanks again to our partners on this Community Strategies Group at the Aspen Institute, Rural LISC, and the Housing Assistance Council. RCAP was grateful to be a part of this partnership and to be able to help host this first of 3 road sessions. So look forward to talking to everyone in the breakout sessions.